right, so get ready, because today we're diving into something pretty fundamental, something so simple you might not even think about it too much. But it could make you rethink, like, the entire universe. We're tackling objects.
Hmm.
And not like just, hey, can you hand me that object kind of way? We're going full-on philosophy mode here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason philosophers have been debating this, the nature of objects for like centuries, you know?
Right.
It seems so simple at first, but like the more you think about it, the weirder it gets.
Exactly.
Like, what even is an object?
And we're going to be using the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy as our guide. Someone sent this in. It's a super dense section all about objects.
Oh yeah, this is a deep one.
And I have a feeling it's going to lead to some pretty wild philosophical questions.
Sure, for sure.
So to kind of like map out our journey, the encyclopedia entry starts with 3 core questions. Okay, first one, what's the opposite of an object? Like, what's even not an object?
Right.
Second, what actually fits into the category of object?
Hmm.
Where do we draw the lines?
Yeah.
And then the big one, the head scratcher,
Mm-hmm.
the what is the meaning of life type question. What's the fundamental nature of an object? Like, what is it made of? How does it exist?
Yeah, that's the $1,000,000 question.
So we're going to try to unpack all that today. And just a heads up, this might get a little trippy.
Buckle up.
Exactly. All right, so first up, the entry dives into something called the umbrella view. This is basically the idea that maybe object is just this, like, giant catch-all term.
Yeah, like it's trying to encompass literally everything that exists.
Exactly. Like, we're talking everything from a rock
Yeah.
to an idea
Huh.
to maybe even, like, a feeling.
A feeling, a number, a law of physics, all under one big object umbrella.
Yeah. Doesn't that feel kind of, I don't know, overwhelming?
Oh, absolutely.
Just trying to pack for a trip and just shove everything you own into one tiny suitcase.
Right. It's like, does the category even mean anything if it includes absolutely everything?
Exactly. And philosophically, this raises some big questions about, like, how we categorize things in the first place.
Right. Like, if a tree and the concept of justice are both objects, is there really any meaningful difference between them?
Yeah, good point. It kind of makes you rethink the whole idea of categories, right?
Definitely.
Okay, so let's maybe fold up that giant umbrella view for a second and move on to something a little more manageable. The entry then jumps into a classic philosophical distinction, objects versus properties. This
Yeah.
might feel a little more familiar.
Yeah, this is a big one in philosophy.
Wow, totally. So think of it this way. You've got a blue cup.
Right.
The cup itself, the thing you can hold, that's the object.
Right.
But the blueness of the cup, that's a property.
So it's like the thing versus the way the thing is.
Exactly. But how do we actually define that difference, in a philosophical way?
Well, there are a few different approaches. One way is to look at language. Like, in the sentence, the cup is blue, the cup is the subject of the sentence. And blue is like, what's being said about the cup? The predicate.
Okay, so the object is kind of like the star of the sentence.
Exact.
And the property is like the supporting role, describing the star.
Right.
Got it.
But of course, it goes beyond just grammar. There are some more like real-world ways to think about this distinction, too.
Okay, I'm listening.
So, for example, objects seem to have a pretty clear location in space and time.
Right. My cup is on the table right now.
Exactly. But what about the property blueness? Like, if there are no blue objects around, where does that blueness go?
Whoa. Yeah, does it just like disappear until another blue thing shows up? Does it have its own little hiding spot in the universe?
Right. It's a tricky one. It's like that old question, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it.
Does it make a sound?
Exactly. But here, it's like, if a color exists without an object, is it even really a color?
Mind blown.
And then the encyclopedia entry brings up another interesting example. Imagine you have multiple copies of the same book. Like, say, objects. Nothing out of the ordinary.
Hey, very meta.
Right. So each physical book is a distinct object.
Right, they're in different places. You can touch each one separately.
Exactly. But they all share the property of being the same shape.
Okay, so multiple objects, but just one property.
Exactly. And this shows how properties can exist in multiple places at once.
Right, like roundness can be in a bunch of different places at the same time.
Exactly. But a single object seems to be stuck in just one spot.
Okay, so that's another way to think about the difference between objects and properties.
Exactly. And there are even more. Like, some philosophers say that only concrete things can be objects.
So like my coffee cup is definitely an object.
Yeah.
But like the Pythagorean theorem, maybe not so much.
Right, that's more of an abstract entity.
Okay, it's starting to make sense.
And then there's this really interesting principle called the identity of indiscernibles.
Okay, that sounds intense.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mind bender. Basically, it says that if two objects have all the same properties, they're actually just the same object.
Wait, so you're saying, like, if we had two coffee cups that were exactly the same down to the last atom,
Yeah.
they'd actually be the same cup.
That's what this principle suggests.
Whoa. So it's like they're not two cups, they're just one cup that's somehow in two places at once.
Right. Now, not all philosophers agree with this principle, but it does raise some super interesting questions about, like, what makes something unique, you know?
Yeah, like what actually makes something this thing and not that thing?
Exactly. If two things are completely identical, what makes them different?
Okay, my brain is officially starting to hurt.
It's a lot to think about, but we're just getting started.
Oh boy. So we've tackled the umbrella view, we've wrestled with objects versus properties, and my brain is already doing backflips.
Yeah, and we haven't even gotten to the really juicy stuff yet. Like, how do we actually define what an object is?
Oh man, but I think we need a break.
Yeah, let's let all this settle in for a bit.
We'll be back soon to keep exploring the philosophical mysteries of objects. Welcome back to our deep dive. So we've been on this wild ride trying to figure out what objects are, right? We talked about the umbrella view, like maybe everything is an object.
Right, that was a big one.
And then, objects versus properties.
That classic distinction.
But now things are going to get even more interesting because now we're going to dive into like the core of what makes an object.
Yeah, we're moving beyond just contrasting objects with other things. We're going to try and define their very essence.
Exactly. And the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, our trusty guide for today, it lays out two main approaches to this: constituent ontologies and relational ontologies.
So two totally different ways of thinking about what objects are and how they relate to their properties.
Okay, let's start with constituent ontologies. It sounds like we're going to break down objects into their, like, smallest parts.
Yeah, you can think of it that way. Constituent ontologies basically say that objects are made up of their properties. Like, the object is just the sum of all its qualities.
Okay, so, like, my coffee cup is just roundness plus whiteness plus ability to hold coffee. Is that all there is to it?
Well, not quite. There are a few different theories within constituent ontologies.
Okay.
One of the most famous ones is called bundle theory, and it suggests that objects are, well, exactly what it sounds like, bundles of properties.
So I'm picturing like a little gift basket filled with roundness and whiteness.
Yeah, kind of. Bundle theory says that's essentially what an object is, just this collection of properties all bundled together.
Okay, but if that's all an object is, what's stopping those properties from just, like, floating away?
That's a good question, and it's one of the main challenges bundle theory faces. How do you explain why these properties stick together and form a single object?
Yeah.
Some bundle theorists say it's because the properties are all located in the same place at the same time. Like, the roundness and whiteness of your coffee cup aren't just randomly scattered throughout the universe.
Right. They're all right here in this cup.
Exactly. And some bundle theorists go even further, suggesting there's some kind of, like, metaphysical glue holding those properties together.
Interesting. So it's not just coincidence that they're all hanging out together. There's something making them stay put.
Exactly. But figuring out what that glue is, that's a whole other philosophical debate.
Okay, so bundle theory is one way to look at objects as being made of their properties. What other constituent ontologies are there?
Well, another big one is bare particularism. This theory says there's more to an object than just its properties.
Oh.
There's also this underlying, like, bare particular. And that bare particular, it's like the foundation for the properties.
Bare particular. It sounds kind of, I don't know, empty.
Yeah, it's like a blank slate, in a way. But bare particularists say that's what gives an object its individuality. It's what makes this cup different from that cup, even if they look exactly the same.
So even if two things have all the same properties, there's something different about them. There's this, like, hidden bare particular that sets them apart.
Exactly. It's like a secret ingredient that makes each object unique.
Okay, so the bare particular is like the core, the essence of the object, and then all the properties kind of attached to it.
Yeah, you could think of it that way. It's like the hook that all the properties hang on.
Got it. So bundle theory says it's just the properties bundled together, and bare particularism says there's this extra something, the bare particular, that holds it all together.
Exactly. Two different ways of looking at the same thing. And then we've got another constituent ontology, hylomorphism. And this one is, well, it's pretty ancient.
Hylomorphism. Yeah, that sounds like it came straight from, like, ancient Greece or something.
Yeah, it has roots in Aristotle's philosophy, and hylomorphism basically says that objects are made of both matter and form.
Okay. Matter, I get. Like, my cup is made of ceramic. That's the matter. But form, that's a little harder to grasp.
Well, think about it like this. You have a lump of clay. It's just raw material, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't have any specific shape or purpose. But when you mold that clay into a cup,
Uh, you give it a form.
exactly, the form is what makes it a cup and not just a random lump of clay.
So the form is like the blueprint. It's what gives the matter its structure and purpose.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's like the idea behind the object.
Okay, I see the connection to Aristotle now. Form and matter were, like, super important in his philosophy. He thought everything in the world was made of those two things.
Right. He saw form as what makes something what it is. Like the matter is just potential, but the form is what makes it actual.
So my coffee cup isn't just a bunch of random ceramic molecules. It's those molecules arranged in a specific way, according to the form of a coffee cup.
Exactly. And hylomorphism doesn't just apply to physical objects. Aristotle thought it applied to living things too. Like he thought the soul was the form of the body.
Whoa, that's deep. So we've got bundle theory, bare particularism, and hylomorphism. Three very different ways of thinking about how objects are made of their properties.
Yeah, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. But now let's shift gears a bit and talk about relational ontologies.
Okay, relational ontologies. They sound a little more, I don't know, abstract. What's the basic idea there?
Well, relational ontologies completely flip the script. They say that objects aren't made of properties.
Wait, what? So if my cup isn't a bundle of properties, and it doesn't have a bare particular, what is it?
Relational ontologies say that an object's properties come from its relationship to other things.
So it's not about what's inside the object, it's about how it interacts with the world around it.
Exactly. They suggest that what we see as properties are actually just a result of those interactions.
Okay, so my cup isn't inherently white, it just looks white to me because of how it reflects light.
Right, or how your brain interprets that light.
Okay, so in relational ontologies, is an object just like a blank slate, like a blob of existence that takes on different characteristics based on how it interacts with other things?
That's a good way to put it. They often describe objects as, well, blobs.
Blobs. It sounds so, I don't know, formless. But okay, I'm curious to hear more. How do different relational ontologies explain this blob view?
Well, one example is Platonism. And I know you're familiar with Plato being a philosopher and all.
Of course. I mean, who hasn't spent hours contemplating Plato's theory of forms?
Right. So remember, those forms are those like perfect, eternal archetypes. They exist in their own realm, separate from our world.
Yeah, like there's this perfect form of a circle, and all the circles we see in the world are just imperfect copies.
Exactly. And Platonism, from a relational ontology perspective, it says that objects don't actually contain those forms.
Okay,
Instead, they participate in those forms.
participate.
Yeah, they have a certain relationship to those forms.
So my coffee cup isn't round because it has the property of roundness inside it. It's round because it's somehow connected to, like, the form of roundness.
Precisely. And this relationship, it's often called exemplification or instantiation. It's how those perfect, eternal forms connect to our imperfect, ever-changing world.
Wow, that's a cool way to think about Plato. So those forms, they're not just abstract ideas, they're actually shaping our world through their relationships with objects.
Exactly. It's a pretty dynamic view of reality. And then there's another relational ontology called class nominalism.
Okay, class nominalism. Break that down for me.
So in class nominalism, properties are seen as classes of objects.
Classes, like sets.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of saying that an object has the property of redness, we'd say it belongs to the class of red things.
Okay, so my cup is white because it's a member of the White Things Club.
Yeah, you got it. It's all about relationships, not about what's inside the object itself.
It's amazing how many ways there are to think about something as seemingly simple as an object. We've gone from bundles of properties to blobs, from internal composition to external relations. It's making me wonder if anything is really as solid as it seems.
That's the power of philosophy, right? It makes you question everything you thought you knew.
Well,
And we've just scratched the surface of these ontological theories. There's so much more to explore.
all right, welcome back to the deep dive. We've been on this, like, epic philosophical journey trying to figure out what these objects are all about. We talked about the umbrella view, is everything an object? And then objects versus properties. But we even went deeper, like, into the core of what makes an object, those ontologies.
Yeah, and it's been a wild ride, for sure. But as we wrap things up here, I'm curious, like, what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners, especially for, like a philosophy enthusiast who's really into this stuff?
Yeah, what should they be, like, thinking about after all this?
I think the biggest takeaway is like, don't be fooled by the simplicity of the word object. I mean, it seems so basic, but then you start digging into it and it just explodes into this this whole universe of philosophical questions.
Right, it's like one of those words we use every day without even really thinking about it, but then you realize it's, like, way more complicated than it seems.
Exactly. And we've seen how object can be contrasted with property, which really highlights the difference between a thing and its features.
Right, like the cup and the cup's redness.
Exactly. And then there's the whole umbrella view, which really pushes the boundaries of like how we even categorize things.
Yeah, can we really just lump everything together and call it an object?
Right. And then we got into all those different theories about what actually makes an object an object. Like, is it a bundle of properties? Is it a bare particular with properties attached to it? Or is it something else entirely?
And it seems like there's no one right answer,
Yeah.
all these different perspectives, and they all have their own strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, and that's okay. I mean, that's part of what makes philosophy so interesting, right? There's always more to explore, always more to think about.
Totally. So for our listener out there, the one who's been following along with this whole deep dive, I think the message is keep questioning, keep exploring, don't take anything for granted.
Exactly. Like, even the simplest things can lead to these really deep, profound questions.
And that's where the real fun begins,
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into objects, I want to leave our listeners with one final question. If we can't even really grasp what objects are, does that change how we think about reality itself?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right. It makes you wonder, if we can't pin down the nature of these fundamental building blocks of our world, what does that say about our understanding of, well, everything?
It's like all those different theories about objects, they're not just abstract ideas. They actually shape how we see the world, how we interact with it. Like, they influence what we consider to be real or true.
Exactly. So the question of what is an object, it's not just a philosophical puzzle. It has real implications for how we understand our place in the universe.
And I think that's a great place to leave things, with this big open question for our listeners to ponder.
Yeah, keep those philosophical wheels turning.
Exactly. Until next time, happy philosophizing.